I have a simple theory as to why so many people end up dying miserably, and why we have these articles like the top 5 regrets of the dying, which pretty much say the exact same thing, that everyone at the end of their life regrets the same few things. In my mind, the reason for that is because we live our lives according to 3 expectations. And if you can get rid of these 3 expectations, you can save yourself tons of pain and live an incredible life. Hey guys, Alex Hine, author of the book Master the Day. Now, the first link below is for a free goal-setting worksheet. If you've ever wanted to live your life deliberately and reach your wildest goals, ideally a couple of them at once, check the first link in the description, add your email to that. You're going to get an email every couple days on how to use goal-setting to change the direction of your life. Now, the first thing to avoid is living your life according to what your friends and family want you to do. I shared the story here of a girl I dated that was Filipino, and her mom had sacrificed massively for more than 10 years to get her family from the Philippines to the United States. And most of that time she was living alone, and she was unhappy. She didn't really develop many close friends or close connections. And so living at home by herself in multiple different states while her family was back home in the Philippines, and she knew she was sacrificing all of this to get her family to the United States. But the problem was, when I dated this girl who was her daughter, they were always getting in these screaming fights because my girlfriend wanted to do something different than what her mom wanted her to do. But then her mom would guilt trip her into saying, "I sacrificed all this for you. How dare you do what you want to do and be so selfish like these Americans?" But the problem is, that's a noble intention. Absolutely a noble intention. And yet, if every day you show up hating your life because you don't want to be doing what you're doing, to then enable your kids to do what they want, you then put the same burden on your children. I think there's a saying from Carl Jung that says, nothing is more damaging or dangerous than the unlived life of the parent that's then projected onto the child. And many of us have felt this. And when you free yourself from what your friends and your families expect you to do, not only are you free to do whatever speaks to you, you're also a lot more likely to be successful at it. Because when you remove the expectation of your friends who want you to be a certain way, or your family that wants you to be successful in a certain career, or live a conventional life path, you're free to live the way you want to live. Now, the second expectation to free yourself of is living your life according to your mind rather than your gut. Now, there's a story I love, even though it's kind of morbid, about these 2 young men when they were in their early 20s. Now, they each had their own passions and their own callings. One man decided to go after what he really, really loved, which is that he wanted to be a wilderness guide and help people track wolves through the Alaskan wild and help people summit mountains and spend time outside like a forest ranger guide. The other one also had his own passion, but he came from a family of physicians and surgeons. And so what this man did was, based on his familial pressure and based on his desire to be successful and be taken seriously and be liked and be wealthy, he decided he was going to go into medicine. And more specifically, he was going to go into the specialty of surgery because he knew he would be respected, he knew he would make the big bucks, and he knew that other people would be able to talk about this guy that was so impressive, the surgeon. Now, some time went by, about 2 decades, and these men were now in their early 40s. And the surgeon had then ascended to be one of the lead people in his hospital, well respected in the medical community. But behind the scenes, he had developed a serious addiction to alcohol. Ironically, they were still close, and the other man was spending a lot of time outside. Everything was fine. There were no major explosions or letdowns in his life. But as time went on, the physician ended up drinking more and more, his surgeon friend, and he became worried about him. And one day, he got an alarming call from him. And the next day, he found out his friend had committed suicide by jumping off this huge building that he was living in New York City. The reason was that he had gotten a divorce several years later and felt like that was the only true anchor left in the man's life. Now, doctors in general have some of the highest suicide rates of any profession. But the story just goes to illustrate there are these things we have convinced ourselves of in our mind that we think are important in life, that we think are more important than how we feel about ourselves. And the problem is, you can spend your whole life chasing that devil of something from the outside that you think is going to make you feel a different way, even though internally you already know it doesn't make you feel good. And so many of us are chasing that thing that our mind has convinced us will get us love from whatever it is, whether it is prestige or respect or new friends or the love of mommy and daddy, which is not true love anyway if they want you to be a certain way that you're not. And so the more you can free yourself of what your mind wants, the more you can follow what intuitively speaks to you, that path you feel like you were born to do, the more you can have a feeling of wholeness that doesn't require you to go find something else outside you to fill this void that just doesn't seem to go away. The third thing I would challenge you to free yourself of is timelines. There was a woman I was coaching in her early 30s several years ago, and she had said that she had been killing it in her career. She was a finance person in New York City, worked long hours, but overall liked it and was doing great financially, had friends, had family, but she couldn't find love. She thought that by now, this timeline, she would have actually attracted her dream guy and her husband, and she would have been able to control that like every other goal that she had achieved by the time she wanted. And so she was pretty distraught because she had managed to reach many of these goals, and yet the one goal that was really essential to her right now, which was love, she could not control, and she could not force the timeline. And so many of us, we want to reach that job or that graduation by this date or this age. We want to find that special person by this age. We want to have the first kid by this age. We want to have traveled to 30 countries before the age of 30. And yet, what if that doesn't happen? What if something comes up, an illness, a death in the family, something that happens where you have to support your family financially and you can't go after your old dreams? What happens if you end up moving somewhere and that long-term partnership ends? There are many things we can control in life, but I would discourage you from thinking that time, specifically the timeline, is one that you can control. Because like me, who ran myself into the ground ragged trying to build a business to a certain dollar amount to quit my job by a certain timeline, naively thinking I could control that timeline, basically just made myself ill. And for so many of us, I see the stress collectively of trying to force things into boxes, the box that of all things we cannot control, which is time, and creating so much misery and pain. So I would challenge you, like the philosophy I talk about in Master the Day, to make each day perfect and then trust that all of these goals will happen eventually in time, and to make peace with that because you don't know when that can happen. The most important thing is to respect time, because whether you waste it or whether you use it wisely, the clock keeps ticking. Now I hope these three things help you in your life. I hope that you can free yourself of these things as best as possible, because in my life experience, the less you can worry about these and pay attention to these, the more freedom you can have internally. So I hope that helps you guys. Again, click the first link below for this free goal setting series. You get an email every couple days on how to use goal setting to totally change the direction of your life. And then come on and check out my related video on the topic right over here.